Hello, thank you for dropping by to watch this video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove the valves on a Honda Shadow 1100 cylinder head using this valve spring compressor tool. And then later in the video, we're going to be reinstalling the valves after checking all specifications, which will be shown in the video, so stay tuned. Without a doubt, this isn't the most practical valve spring compressor to work on a motorcycle cylinder head, but I have it. I bought it years ago to disassemble car cylinder heads. But anyhow, you take and you noticed how the pointy part at the middle you put right in the middle of the valve, and then you clamp it down fast to take tension off the spring and remove those keepers, which I used a small magnet. And once you take those out, the valve spring it will come right off. However, I'm having a little trouble because I didn't compress it quite far enough, but I got the other keeper out. And once the other one's out, then you just take and down on the bottom of this tool, you can take and turn this handle, which again adjusts that rod to keep pressure against the valve. However, I haven't used this in a while. That rod should actually just fall down out easily, but it was giving me trouble. But it came, and there's our valve springs. And then after the valve springs are removed, we can just slide the valve out down through the lower part of the cylinder head. Later in the video, I will be inspecting these valves closely, taking measurements, cleaning them, but for now I just want to remove them all. That was an exhaust valve. You do not want to mix the valves up. I'm going to myself put them in a Ziploc bag and label them so I won't mix them up upon reassembly. And now we're going to do one of the intake valves. Alrighty, and now we're down to just one more valve to remove after this. There's again our springs. And as before, the valve will just be sliding and out right down through the valve guide and out through the bottom of the cylinder head. And we'll be moving on to one more to go. One of the trickiest things with working on this motorcycle cylinder, it's not a real large area. Like a car cylinder head, I usually work on V8s, they're long, but because you have to have the back of it accessible that you can get your valve spring compressor on. But it is working. And there's our keeper out. And now we can just take the pressure off, and there is our third and final valve. Again, I'm only showing the one cylinder head, and there's our springs off, just like before, and down and out with the valve again. Now that the valves are all removed, I'm going to take and remove these valve seals. I'm replacing it with new ones. You should always replace with new ones. They're not that expensive. One of the cheapest parts I bought on this project of this motorcycle was these replacement valve seals, and there's one off. Yeah, I hope you find my videos acceptable. I try to take good videos, so it's a lot of this repair work is hard to explain, but again, the old saying, "A picture's worth 1,000 words" is so true. And on those words, here's the last one. It's about ready to pop off, and there it is. And then we can keep proceeding here. I will flip it over and remove in my case, the head gasket, most of it stuck with the cylinder head. It don't necessarily mean yours will. Yours might stick on the cylinder block, but and there, pull that out of the way. And now it's time I'm going to get rid of these pins, these locating pins from the bottom of the cylinder head. So later on, when it comes time to sand the surface, it'll be easy to do with no obstructions in the way. Also, it's worth mentioning, mine, these pins came out and stayed in the cylinder head, but in your case, they might have stayed in the block. But anyhow, I'm using carefully vice grips, trying not to crimp them shut there, and just working back and forth till they turn free. And there, one came out successfully. Alrighty, there's the other locating dowel. Now we're going to remove the carburetor insulator from the cylinder head. It's still in place on the head in my case. Indeed, and I would not want to let it on because I'm very soon going to be soaking this in perch cleaner, and that wouldn't be good on the rubber perch to be soaking in the perch cleaner. And after the clamps loosen, take a screwdriver and we'll pry it the rest of the way off. They are a tight fit. Now it goes into the perch cleaner. Okay, I left mine soak overnight, and now I'm going to take these are washers to go down below the valve springs that actually stayed in place. I'm going to remove them now. I didn't even pick up on them on the disassembly first time around. They were there. And then we're going to just turn the head around and do some scrubbing where the gasket surface was before I worry about going over with a piece of sandpaper to be sure it's good. And you can see after soaking in the solvent, it's easily coming off even that old gasket material and such there with not a lot of scrubbing effort. And you can see like two between the valves is nice and clean. And now that I'm fairly satisfied, I'm going to take some air and dry the first washing material off the head before proceeding on the next step in our work on this. Okay, now that it's dried off, now I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper and go over the gasket, what little bit of the material is left of it that is nice and clean. And like I say, it's not, I'm using a 100 grit sandpaper. Don't want anything real coarse. Again, it's aluminum cylinder head. It's not like working with cast iron. And now I'm going to take a filler gauge, 2 thousandths, the service limit, and a straight edge, and check for any cylinder head warpage, as you can view in the video how I'm doing so. As you can see, I'm checking various spots very close together on the cylinder head for warpage. I want to go over pretty close. Okay, now I'm going to look here real quick between where the valves sit on the cylinder head and check for cracks, and I don't see any, but that is one of the most popular places the head will crack. And now we're going to take and clean the carbon off the valve. I'm starting with the exhaust valve. It's on this Honda Shadows, the largest head valve of the three of them, so it's not hard to distinguish between the other ones. Alrighty, I want to take the valve and slide it back in the valve guide and check for freedom of movement. It literally should move simple as can be and fall straight out. Otherwise, the valve's bent or the valve guide's damaged. Now I'm going to check the valve stem outside diameter. And the service limit is 257 thousandths of an inch, which I am. I'm pleased on that. Now I'm going to check the free length of the valve springs. This is the inside spring, and the service limit is 1 57/100. And the outer one, the length of it should be, this is the exhaust we're checking now. The service limit is 1 646 thousandths, and mine actually is a little bit longer. So I'm going to say we're all good to go, and now we're going to clean the next valve. And as I did with the exhaust valve, I'm going to just repeat with the intake valve. After I clean it, I'm going to just check it for freedom of movement in the valve guide. And I'm going to check the outside diameter of the valve stem again, like I did on the exhaust valve, except this is the intake. And I'm measuring 258 thousandths. Now, the service limit is technically 259 thousandths. I'm actually a thousandth under, but I'm going to let mine go. If you wanted to be real technical, it probably should be taken care of. Nevertheless, in order to do so, you need access to a machine shop to install a new valve guide and such. I'm going to, again, on my case, it's not that far off. I'm going to just trust it. On the other hand, my valve springs are all better than the service limit, so that's good news. I'll be sure to let in the description the specifications on all this that I am measuring to aid in your own personal motorcycle repair project. And as you can see, this valve stem is actually a little bit over the minimum thickness, but I'm not going to say it's going to work just fine, and it moves freely in the valve guide. Now I'm going to install both intake valves completely tight against the valve seat, and I'm going to check here to see if they are sealing well, and shove the other one up into place, and I'm going to stick it on top of this light, and then I'm going to show you, this is going to be a little tricky, but we're going to look in through the, again, at the valves to see if they are closing the whole way. And if you look, when I pull up on the one intake valve, you don't see any light from down below, but on the other one, even when I was pulling as hard as I could, there was still a little light. So I am going to try some valve lapping. I've never done this before, but the valve lapping compound and the tool to do so was a minimal investment, and just take a little bit of the valve lapping compound, and we're going to just put it around the edge of the valve where it was sitting against the valve seat. Alrighty, after applying the valve lapping compound, I'm going to slide valve stem back into the valve guide. And now we're going to take and put this little cup, sort of put you in mind of a miniature plunger, and then start lapping the valve. You can hear when you first start lapping, it's a real coarse compound, but as you lap more, it becomes thinner and gets into a finer grade grit. And once you're done lapping, you want to wipe the compound off. You don't want any down inside the, it's going to end up against the valve guide or anything because it would scratch it and harm it. And I'm actually using a little bit of lacquer thinner for final cleaning. Now the big question is it sealing completely? We're going to do the same basic test as we did earlier with the valve that was the problem. And to me, it looks like there's no light shining through around the edges like we had earlier. And there I opened it a little bit and there it's completely shut. And it looks just fine to me. And here I'd like to show you a close-up of what it looks like after you do the valve lapping, how it cleans the seat up real nice. I did them all. I'm only going to show in the video, and there's the valve. But yes, I was pleased. I spent probably on each valve, probably about 5 minutes on each one. Now it's time to reinstall the valves, but first we're going to put new valve seals in, as I made the comment, but not till we put these lower washers that the valve springs rest against. Don't want to forget those, because you would not be able to put them on with the valve seal. And don't worry, you won't mix the lower one up with the upper one because if you see that upper washer it tapers in, so it'll accommodate those little locks that hold it in place. And now, before we put the valve seal on, I'm going to coat it with some engine assembly lube. And I'll put what I used in the description, but I bought it at the Napa store. I've used it for years, and I've actually had this tube around for years. I haven't rebuilt any engines for a long time, but I still have some left. Yes, this engine assembly lube will help reduce the friction between the valve stem and the valve seal until oil pressure is built up fully. Again, remember it's oil and oil's drained on it. And now we're just going to take and slide it back down on after it's coated onto the cylinder. And I'm going to do the other two while I'm at the process of installing the valve seals. Okay, after now firmly pushing valve seals on as much as I could with my fingers, I'm going to take and socket and drive them on the rest of the way. You want a socket that fits like right around the outside edge of the valve seal. In my case is a 10 millimeter. I don't see why yours, unless you're working on just watching this video for the principle on how to work on a cylinder head, but if you're working on the same motorcycle, should be no different. And also I'm using a rubber mallet instead of a regular hammer. It doesn't take much effort to press them on the whole way. And now we can install our valves. Just be sure they go back in their original location. But before installing the valves, I'm also going to coat them with the engine assembly lube. Okay, and there goes the valve back up in. I chose to start with one of the intake valves, and now we can install our valve springs. The inside spring's no different, but the outer spring, the ends that are coiled tighter together, go towards the cylinder as instructed by the Honda shop manual. And I'm going to use the same tool that I used on this assembly for reassembly. And I'm going to compress the valve spring so we can get the valve keeper back in place. As mentioned earlier in this video, this is probably more of an automotive uh, spring compression tool, but it does work, but there are a variety of them available. And again, as long as you can get the spring compressed enough to get the valve keepers back on is all that is important. Yes, indeed, if I was working on motorcycle cylinder heads every day, or even a half a dozen times or so a year, I'd buy another valve spring compressor, more suitable for the job. But after this is the first and only time I've ever worked on a motorcycle cylinder head. Who knows when I'll ever, if do one again. Okay, now we're going to install the valve, the spring keepers, and just going to put a little bit of the engine assembly lube to help hold them in place. And the tapered end faces down toward the cylinder. There's half of it on, and then we'll get the other piece in, the other half. Alrighty, and there's the other half on. Now just release the tension on the spring compressor, and it's in place. Otherwise, the valve spring would have fell off. And now we're going to do the next intake valve. I do apologize at times when I'm holding, like when I was putting the engine assembly lube on the valve stem, the camera didn't want to focus. I don't know, the autofocus is being stubborn. But okay, now here we're going to install our spring compressor again. And this time I'm going to show you with the valve keepers in place. You just turn this, like I say, lever, loosen it, and takes the tension off the spring. And here we are down to the last and final, and in my case, is the exhaust valve. And I'd like to hear one last time give you a look at the springs. Again, there is the outer spring and our inner spring. And remember where the coils are tighter together on the outer spring do face the cylinder head or the combustion chamber, however you would like to refer to it as. Okay, and then one last time using the valve spring compressor tool, push the rod up against the valve as tight as possible and tighten that lever, then just taking the rest of the tension and just like a ratcheting mechanism, top it catches, push it in, holds the spring down in place, and there installing the last of the keepers. Now, I hope you have found the information in this video useful. I've tried to explain to the best of my knowledge and, most importantly, give you good video to look at. Because, again, the picture is a lot of times more help than actually explaining. And then just going to take a rubber mallet and gently tap each valve to make sure the keepers are on tight, and they are. As always, thank you for watching. Please check back for other videos. Goodbye, and thank you.